Well, hello guys. This is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl, back with another fabulous video for you today. And in this video, we are wrapping up House of Flesh. We are now in the last 3 chapters. I can't believe it, guys. We have been reading this book for the better part of this year, and now we are finally in the last 3 chapters. So we'll get to know what happens now, and I'm so excited. And let me tell you guys, I was reading this in advance today just to get prepared a little bit with the chapter. And it's one that's going to make you just drop your jaw. It is definitely a big twist, a big turn at the end. I'll tell you, Doo-Wop Bob was right. He has already read this book since he collects gold medal books. And he mentioned that there was going to be a big shocker at the end. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you, there certainly is. So we are going to be very excited to learn what that is today. I see a couple of folks joining in the chat, so welcome. I've got Tia Fane here from Canada, and Tia Fane just sent me a fabulous box of friend mail, and I can't wait to unbox that. That will be coming in a special unboxing next week, so you want to stay tuned for that. And I see Sharon Delaney is here. Welcome, guys. I'm so glad you're tuning in. Now, I do want to mention a couple of fun things coming up on my channel this weekend. Of course, we got the book reading today, but on Sunday for Halloween, I'm doing something very special. I'm going to host a live costume party, and we're going to play Vintage Jeopardy. So I'm going to be joined by Patrick, Trusty Huckster Mercantile, Dee from Thrill of the Thrift, Vintage Vinny, and of course Laura and Mary Beth from Fatbird Finds. So that will be this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. before Tales from the Triptych. Tales from the Triptych will still be going on. That will be at 8 p.m. on Soul Nate's channel with some great information on shipwreck porcelain. So definitely some great things I'm a part of this weekend to tune into. I see Bob is joining us in the chat. Hello, Bob. Welcome, welcome. Sharon is here. I'm so glad. Coming in from Canada. Lily is here. Or Lila. I think Lila. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, but welcome. I'm so glad you're joining us. So since Bob is here, I will repeat what I mentioned earlier. Bob was right. Bob totally called it, and he has read this book, so of course he knew, but there's definitely a big twist at the end, folks. A very, very big twist. We want to turn what should I say? We want to tune in for this because this is going to be very exciting. Bob is saying I should wear a Vlada costume. So Bob, I don't know exactly yet what I'm going as for Halloween, although I like the idea of a Vlada costume. I think that would be so fun. I was thinking of, and you guys can let me know in the chats, I was going to go as my normal Columbia from Rocky Horror Picture Show, which you guys know I love that movie, and I try to go every year. They're not having a showing of it this year, but I try to go every year to a showing. So I've got the costume already for that. But it would be really fun if I dressed up as Jello, someone pointed out. So I might try. I don't know if I can make it work, but I might try to do some Jello costuming and see if I can become a giant Jello mold. I don't know if that's going to work out. I tried a little bit yesterday with some things, and I just really couldn't get it to stay. So we'll see. There might be a surprise on Sunday with what I'm wearing. But if I can't get the Jello to work, maybe I will have to be Vlada. Let's see. Oh, Tia Fane saying that he has some suspicions about the twist, but she's not saying anything. Well, I'll tell you. So we got to get caught up a little bit, a little recap of what happened last week. So as we know, up until this point, Layla Doan, the main love interest in the story, is missing. Harry Wilde, our main character, who's a basketball player from New York, was sent to jail for attempted murder, but then he was released on bail. So we have that going on. And then we have Gail, which is, of course, Harry's ex-wife, who has a dog that was staying with Dr. Doan, who is Layla's husband. And, of course, Dr. Doan was found murdered. Layla has disappeared. We all think that she's murdered. And then, of course, Dr. Doan's ex-wife, who's no longer living, Alice, was also murdered. So there's a lot to find out in this chapter. And of course, our main police detective in the story fell in love with Alice. So he's really been trying to figure out who murdered her all along because it broke her heart when she died. So there is just like so much to unpack. It is unbelievable. And these next couple of chapters, it's a big twist. So that's going to be fun. Let's see. I think you should try Patrick's opera fudge recipe. Perhaps the recipe is cursed. Very well could be, Tia Fane. I've never made fudge, but I've heard that it's pretty hard. So when I was watching Patrick do that, I thought, I probably would have done the same things that Patrick did because I don't bake and I'm not very good at baking. And I can cook. I have to say, I feel like I'm a pretty good cook, but I cannot bake to save my life. I will burn cookies from the Nestle Toll House package. That is exactly how terrible I am at baking. But if you want me to make chicken piccata or any type of, dish, oh yeah, that's no problem. I don't know what it is with me and baking. Anyway, I can't seem to do that. Don't forget Gail. Yes, I think Gail had a thing for Dr. Doan, definitely. But Dr. Doan, we found out, didn't want anything to do with Gail. He was very faithful to his wife. So there's something that is very interesting there. I looked, Jennifer Meller, believe it or not, there is not a Jell-O costume. You would think that there would be a Jell-O costume, but there isn't. They don't make one. Now, there is something like sriracha. You can get a giant sriracha bottle if you want to dress up as that. You can be a banana. You can be angry and weird peanut butter. Oh, yes. I'll show you the peanut butter costume I found last night. There's a giant tub of peanut butter. Now, mind you guys, this is for kids. And I was sitting there going, what in the world? There's a little kid wearing this wackadoodle peanut butter outfit. That peanut butter guy, that little nut, looks a little bit crazy. So I don't know what is going on there. But yes, I discovered some very odd Halloween costumes last night while going down that fun rabbit hole, looking to see if they make any type of Jell-O costume, and they do not. Now, there are a lot of Jell-O like homemade costumes I found. Some of them look a little bit, I don't know how to put this in a YouTube friendly way, but it's an A for effort. But if you look at them, you'll quickly realize that they look a little like something else. So we can't wear that on YouTube. So and we'll see what happens. I'm just very excited to see if I can make it work. Let's see who else is in the chat. Barbie is joining us. Punk Funk and Junk. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, we're all kids at heart. That's right, Sharon. Absolutely. Well, I could be a giant Coca-Cola swatch watch. A Coca-Cola swatch. I sure could, love. I don't know. We'll have to see when I can make work in this time. Now, I also thought about doing a Men in Black costume because I've got Louie the pug and she could be Frank. But Louie doesn't like to dress up. She'll eat the costume probably before we go on air. So I don't know how that's going to work either. But I do have the costume for that because I did that a couple of years ago, which was fun. Hi, Linda Punky. Thanks so much for tuning in. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're tuning in for another episode of House of Flesh. So we're going to get started with this chapter in just a minute, just letting some more people come in. I know it takes a while for that YouTube notification to go out. So that's always something I'm thinking about when I go live for these book readings, is I want everyone to get a chance to come in and get settled before we start the chapter. Let's see. I'm thinking red tulle or netting. Oh, now that might work, Leela. I don't know how. Yeah, maybe red tulle would do it. You might be onto something there. We'll have to see. Louie is such a little diva. She really is. She is one little piece of work, but I love Louie so much. She is just adorable. Pugs are known for being that way anyway. They just have such fun, pronounced personalities. It's so great. And I'll show you guys though. So last night when I was talking to Angela about the Jell-O mold, we were having so much fun. And she suggested that I strap the Jell-O mold to my head, like the actual mold, and try to do it that way. So this is a screenshot that we took from our video call last night, and I look really, really goofy. I do. I look so goofy, but we were having such a good time trying to make it work. So this was me with the Jello apparatus strapped to my head, and Angela's just laughing so hard because it was hilarious. It kept falling off of my head. I mean, we were just having such a good time with this, and so we're going to try to try to make it work, but we'll see. It's just that the Jello mold has that center thing, so it doesn't want to stay on my head. But I thought it would be cool if I could fashion it so that it looked like I had Jello, like, coming down, or like, someone suggested that I put like the Jello mold on my head and then had like the recipe sandwich board or something. I don't know. We'll see, but it's a work in progress. And I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll have to just keep playing with it. Tim, yes, they are. I can attest to that. I'll raise my hand. That made me laugh. What a good group we have here. Yes, slime. Well, I could do something with green slime. I also thought about cutting out felt and then like somehow attaching it to a shirt. I don't know. We'll just have to keep playing with it, but maybe I'll post some story updates this weekend. So if you want a behind the scenes look at my Jello making of the Jello costume to see if I can get it to work, I'll post it on my stories. So you guys stay tuned for Instagram for that. Oh, that's okay, Linda, but I appreciate you trying and thinking that you could do it. Well, I didn't really think about it until a few days ago when I was talking to someone and they suggested that I do the Jello thing. And I thought, oh, that would be really funny, because I was just going to go as Columbia. I already have that costume done. I've already made that and sourced for it. So anyway, that's the fun behind the Halloween. And we have a lot to catch up on in House of Flesh. So we're going to get started on that right now. So we are in the last couple of chapters. There's 3 chapters left. And let's see. We are in chapter 26 because we had just finished with chapter 25. And in chapter 25, the last sentence of that chapter, it seems like Layla has reappeared. So we got to find out all about this in this next chapter. So we are now in chapter 26, and we are going to start that right now. After a while, I stepped back to let my eyes absorb her. I felt that I had been reborn. You look different, I said. Well, that's because you've never seen me dressed up. Layla made a complete turn like a fashion model. Do you like me this way, honey? I wasn't sure. She was no longer the simply and even dowdily dressed woman living in an isolated, crumbling house in the country where style didn't matter. She wore a beige silk dress with buttons running down in the front and the high collar to the hem, and over it a tiny jacket of the same color and material. On her black hair sat a white, small-brimmed Panama hat. Her high-heeled shoes made her taller, and for some reason she also appeared slimmer. Her mouth was redder, fuller with paint, more sensuous, and whatever she had done to her dark eyes made them more vivid. She had become too much like any other smartly dressed woman. In a way, she was a stranger. She removed her tiny jacket and her hat and placed them on the table where her black plastic handbag already lay. Her hairdo, like the rest of her, had become sleek and fashionable and sophisticated, and her smile was different too, the way she stood smiling with her eyes as well as her mouth, nothing aloof, complete and generous, giving all of herself. I reached for her, and then she puts her hands on me fiercely and rose to her toes. It was just awful being away from you, Harry, she said against my mouth. I love you so. Layla had said it. She had called me darling and honey and Harry, and she had said that she loved me. I said, where were you? The question brought us both back to the immediate past. Without moving, she seemed to go away from me. I read in the paper all about what happened to Kenneth, she said. Everybody thought you were dead. We believed that he killed you." "Yeah, I read that too." Her arms dropped from me. Suddenly, her painted face looked garish, and in some subtle way unfamiliar in the certain firelight. She said, "Harry, did you—" She looked away from me. "No," I said. "The paper said you had a fight, and if you did it by accident—" "I didn't," I said harshly. "You can believe me." Layla swung around to me and clung to me, and her face against my shoulder. I believe you," she said, brokenly, and fell and shivered. "Did he mean so much to you?" "No, but I had stopped caring for him. But I didn't want to hurt him." I pulled her down with me to the wing chair. She kicked off her shoes and curled up on my lap and snuggled into me. "Now, tell me where you were again," I said. "I went to New York," she said, in a low, monotone voice. "I thought I could handle Kenneth. I could have if I had gone to bed with him. But I couldn't let him touch me, not after you. He acted crazy. I'd never seen his eyes like that. He said if I had slept with you, I could sleep with my husband. And he held my arm and he hurt me. I made myself kiss him and be affectionate. And I said I'd be right back from the bathroom. I went out to the hall and slipped downstairs. In the hall closet, there was an old dress and a pair of old sneakers, and I put them both on." "Oh, is that why I found your wrapper in the kitchen?" "Yes, I dressed in the kitchen. All I had was the cotton dress and the sneakers. My other clothes were upstairs in the bedroom where he was waiting for me. My bag with my money was in it too. I just had to leave it the way it was. I didn't even take time to look for a flashlight. I made my way to the highway and waited there till daylight. The driver of one of those huge hauling trucks gave me a lift. He was going to New York. He was very nice. He bought me lunch, and when he dropped me off in New York, he wanted to lend me a few dollars, but I only took a dime for the subway." "Why didn't you come to my bungalow?" "Don't you see how dangerous that would have been? I was afraid that as soon as Kenneth missed me, he would go there with a rifle." "Well, he didn't." "I didn't dare take the chance. The crazy feeling was there, and there was no telling what he'd do." Her mouth trailed over the side of my neck. "I plan to get in touch with you and have you join me in New York eventually." "Well, why didn't you?" "But honey, this is only Thursday, and I didn't reach New York until Tuesday afternoon. I went to a girlfriend's apartment. I had slept the night before much, so I had spent the whole day resting. She gave me a hot bath and put me to bed. All the next day, I stayed in the apartment resting too." "Well, didn't you see a newspaper?" "My friend is a sweet girl, but not very bright. She never buys a newspaper. This was the first time I left her apartment, and when I went shopping, she lent me some money and enough to buy clothes and to get me decently to the stores. I bought every single thing I'm wearing now, and I had lunch and then went to a beauty parlor. I read the paper there while I was sitting under a dryer, and that was how I found out. I almost fainted right there in the chair." "Oh, you poor kid." I stroked her leg that was smooth and warm under nylon. "All I could think of was that I had to rush to you, and you were so far away. It was maddening. All that waiting and waiting for them to finish with me in the beauty parlor, waiting almost 2 hours in Grand Central for a train, and then the train was going so slow." She held me tight. "But I'm now here, darling, and everything is all right." Past her sleek hairdo, I saw that the fire was beginning to die. I thought of replenishing it and then remembered that the wood bin was empty. "Well, we have to let the police know you're alive," I told her. "Does that mean either we'll have to go to them or they'll come here?" "Yes." "Must we tonight? Our first night when we don't have to pull down the shades and lock the doors." Layla took my face between her hands. "Honey, can't it wait until tomorrow?" Her mouth moved up to mine, avid and demanding. I felt all of her demanding me. "Why not tomorrow?" My hand was going to let the answer be. She slipped off my lap. Shorter again without shoes, she stood on the hearth and stretched her arms, long and tall. "Do you remember the first time I was here and you undressed me?" she said softly. I rose and she stood motionless as I opened the dress buttons. Slowly, she had said the first time, and it was even slower now because there were many buttons from the high collar to the hem, and my fingers were clumsy and fumbling, my hands shaking. I was kneeling at her feet when I had the last button open. I straightened, and when the beige dress was off her, I saw it was a girdle that made her look slimmer. Her hands were clenched at her sides. She seemed to be holding herself together, taut like a wire stretched almost to the breaking point, and at the same time so softly and ripe and warm, and my hands kept shaking slowly, so much more slowly than the first time. Garters unfastened, full-length hose to be peeled off, and the complications of a girdle. When I stood, my knees were like water. "No, don't touch me yet," she said softly. "Bring me a blanket." This, too, would be the first evening together on a blanket in front of the fire. Always a ritual and always an interlude to prepare for ecstasy. I pulled the blanket off the bed. She stood away from the fireplace, her face in almost complete shadow and the glow on the rich golden tan curves of her. This was as I had known her, without the unfamiliarity of fancy clothes, still and curiously remote in her nakedness. The searing, blending, maddening beginning, delayed and almost unendurable tension. I felt her wash me as I spread the blanket. The phone rang, a jarring, violent sound, outraging our privacy. I moved to the phone. "Oh, do you have to answer it?" she said. I turned. She was sitting on her legs on the blanket. Her hands had moved up to her hair to take it down, and her breasts lifted, and I couldn't stop looking at her. She didn't, after all, do anything about her hair. She stretched out on the blanket, her toes arched towards the fire. "You're still dressed," she said. "Don't torment me. Come on." And the phone kept ringing. It might go on for some time, and then whoever it was might shortly try again. I wanted no intrusion tonight in this snug and passionate world we were making for ourselves, right here in this very bungalow. "It will only take a minute," I told her and picked up the phone. Gail's voice said, "Is that you, Harry? I read in the papers that they released you. I'm so glad." "Where are you, Gail?" "I'm home. This is the third time I tried to get you since this afternoon, but there was no answer. Harry, do you know that woman, that Mrs. Doane everybody thinks was killed? Well, she's alive after all." I just stood there. "Harry, did you hear what I said? Mrs. Doane is alive. I saw her in New York this afternoon. Are you listening?" "Where did you see her?" I said. "I was crossing Fifth Avenue at 39th Street. She was walking on the sidewalk. I thought it couldn't be Mrs. Doane because she was supposed to be dead, and she was dressed so different. I mean, rather smartly, but I went up to her and I said, 'Mrs. Doane,' and she stopped and looked at me. It was Mrs. Doane, all right. I knowed her face anywhere. And do you know what she did? She didn't say a word. She just hurried off into the crowd." I looked at Layla. She lay flat on her back, so still that she might have been asleep. "Harry, are you there?" "Yes," I said. "Did she recognize you?" "Well, why, of course she did. We stood so close we could have touched each other, and we looked full into each other's face. Harry, I just don't think she wanted to be seen. There was no blood in my hand holding the phone. No, she didn't want to be seen. I just don't know what to do. After all, I think the police think she's still dead. Harry, what should I do?" "I'll take care of it." "Your voice sounds so, I suppose it's a shock, but the police should be told, shouldn't they?" "I'll take care of it, Gail. Goodbye." I hung up. For a moment, I stood with my back to Layla, listening to the silence, and then tiredly I returned. Her cheek was against the blanket, and her eyes were dark and expressionless, watching me. She seemed to be holding herself in suspension. "You murdered them," I said tonelessly. All right, folks, we are going to move into the next chapter in just a second, chapter 27. But that was quite the chapter. We've got a murderer on the loose who's still alive. Oh, my goodness, folks. Yes, Michelle, girdles are total false advertising. And yes, Barbie, it's all a setup. No worries, Bob. You can come back and watch the replay. All right, let's see what else. Yes, Tim, I have a bad feeling about this too. Hey, Catherine, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I know you're getting ready for your craft videos, but I'm so glad you stopped to say hi. So, guys, if you're not following the eclectic of Thrifter and Crafter, that's Catherine. Go follow her. She does some great things. And I'm very excited to see what her next crafting projects are. So stay tuned for that. So yes, this book, I told you, it has a twist. It has a major twist. I was seeking suspicion too, Tim, that Harry's in danger. If I were Harry, I would get out now. I really, really would. All right, well, we're going to move into our next chapter now. Yeah, I think Spanx too. You know, they're just so uncomfortable. Why would anyone want to wear all of that? I just don't even bother. Yep. He just said that she murdered them. So we're going to find out what happens next, because I think this is going to be a shocker for all of you guys. It certainly was for me. I had my jaw just hit the floor when I read the next chapter. So we're going to start with chapter 27 right now. Layla sat up. She crossed her arms over her breast as if sudden modesty. Her painted lips paired and stayed that way without anything coming past them. It should have been clear as soon as I saw you alive, I said. And I was stunned and happy, and I wanted you. Gail's call woke me up. You know what she told me? The red lips moved. We saw each other in New York. I forgot to tell you. What of it? Everything, I said. You ran from her. You were in panic because her seeing you messed up your scheme. Then you realized that you had to come here tonight to see what would happen when Gail told me that you were alive. What are you talking about? I should have guessed when I saw the dogs out of their yard. Who else would they have let murder their master? The fire was gone except for smoldering ashes in the glowing backlog. But what light there was picked out only her. It didn't matter. She might have been fully clothed instead of naked. All I felt was a cold lump in the pit of my stomach. You're talking nonsense, she said, crouching on the blanket. No, everything I thought up to now was nonsense. Bill Hickey said it would have been too complicated and too much coincidence if anybody but I had killed Kenneth Doane. But that was when you were supposed to be dead. When you were alive, there's no complication and no coincidence. It makes everything that happens simple and logical and connected. Layla stood up. Her hands moved over her stomach and to her hips. The fire flared briefly as if she had willed it to reveal her in all her womanliness. Have I changed? She said huskily. Am I any different from the woman you want? You've changed. You're a murderer. I held on to the wing of the chair. I suppose now you're going to dance for me. There's no black veil for you here. Anyway, it won't work with me. I think I have more willpower than Kenneth Doane. She kept looking at me, though I stood away from what remained of the fire, and she couldn't see me as more than a blurred shadow. She touched her breasts, then her face, and then her hand fell limply and her shoulders drooped. Get dressed, I said. I wouldn't like the police to find you here like this. She stepped off the blanket and swung toward me, her hand seizing me, and thrust herself hard against me. Why must we lose each other? We'll be all together, always from now on. Her hips stirred against me. That's what we both want. We wanted it all along. We have each other now. I remained rigid, feeling nothing for her. Making love to you, I said, would be like making love to death. Don't say that. I didn't want to hurt Kenneth. Oh, my darling, just kiss me. She was on her bare toes, climbing up against me, trying to get her mouth to mine. I'm wondering how within a minute a man could have been so washed clean a desire for her. The demanding contact of her flesh infuriated me. I gripped her bare shoulders and flung her away. She fell against the edge of the wing chair and sprawled from it onto the blanket. She lay face down, shuddering but voiceless, and I saw a bruise on her hip, and I was sorry I had done that. After a moment, she rolled over onto her back, and I thought her head was to the flagstone hearth, and she lay there motionless and lax, with her angular face static and her eyes empty. I gathered up her clothes and tossed them beside her and said, "Get dressed." She pushed herself up to her knees with slow, mechanical motions, selected her undergarments, and straightened up. But she didn't quite admit defeat. As she walked by me into greater demise, her hips undulated provocatively, but I wasn't provoked. The floor lamp went on, and I saw her step into her girdle. She could have easily dressed without having to put on the light. She was dressing before me and taking her time at it, in a last attempt to make me succumb to her flesh before covering it. She couldn't understand. Watching her wriggle into that girdle had become indecent, even obscene. I moved to the table and lit a cigarette. "It's so unnecessary," she said. Why must you do this to us?" She was standing with the brazier in one hand. Her mouth, her eyes, the thrust of her body pleaded me. I said nothing. I walked stiffly to the phone and at the other end of my bungalow. "Harry, you're going to make yourself look foolish. Why can't you just tell them?" I turned. "All of it, beginning with the night George Wellman introduced you to Kenneth Doane. You don't know. I know now. It's become simple, uncomplicated. It all flows out of the kind of woman you are, and there's only one thing that happens to mean anything to you, and that's the man you happen to want at the time. I want you. For how long before you decide you'll have to get rid of me too?" When Layla went back to the fireplace, barefooted in her underwear, she sat on the ledge of the armchair and drew on a stocking. "If I did anything, it was for you," she said as she fastened a garter. "It's because I loved you." I started to laugh and then broke it off. There was truth in what she said, though not by any means the whole truth, and there was no rush to pick up the phone. The night was ahead and endless days, and there was time to get it out in the open and look at it. "You kept insisting that Kenneth Doane was kind and gentle," I said. "You should have known. Also faithful to his wife, to his first wife, and then to his second wife. Gail told me she couldn't get anywhere with him, couldn't even lure him up to his apartment. You must have tried when he was married to Alice, and I think you failed too. You fell for that magnificent hulk with everything you had. George Wellman told me about you, a one-man woman. You passed up what few other women would. Money and a fine home and fancy clothes, because the right man didn't go with them. And when the right man came along, it was the works." Bending over to pick up her dress, she looked at me over a bare shoulder. "Is that supposed to be bad?" "No, but murder is. That spring you must have come up here to see Doane. Most of the day Alice was away teaching school. You had plenty of opportunity to be alone with him. The house is so isolated that you could avoid being seen and coming and going there with him. But Doane wouldn't play. No doubt he cared quite a lot for you. What happened afterwards shows that he did. But he cared for Alice too. And in his dull, stubborn way, he insisted on being faithful to her. Alice was in your way, and you murdered her." She had been buttoning the dress from the bottom up. Her fingers froze on the third or fourth button from the top. "Kenneth killed her," she said. "Why? There were safer ways to get rid of her so he could marry you without shedding blood. She had money for him to want to get on his hands, or not enough to count. Anyway, neither of you cared enough for money. Why not a simple divorce? Or if she kicked up a fuss over divorce, why not just run off together? Anything was easier and safer than murder." I shook my head. Bill Hickey pointed that out, but finding the bones, the evidence appeared to justify rumors. Our minds became clouded. At the time, I hadn't happened to make me see clearly, and I hadn't yet found out what made you tick. Layla put on her shoes. She sat down at the table and pushed aside her jacket and hat and took a compact out of her handbag. The remoteness had returned to her face. She was the way she had been at the beginning of every meeting with me, except for tonight, restrained and indrawn and waiting. So it was you, and you alone, I went on. I think you did it. And when you learned he'd be away from home for a day or two longer, you killed her. Did you use a crowbar or a hammer, or did you strangle her or shoot her? Her profile was static as she dabbed the powder on her strained, angular cheek. You killed her and buried her, I said. Where we found her grave is another thing that shows he didn't do it. He knew the place. He had picked a better spot and dug deeper. You're a strong woman, Layla, but not only a woman, and you couldn't drag or carry her far. You dug at the foot of the knoll. You couldn't get down deep enough because of the ledge rock. But by then you were exhausted and panicky, and that grave had to do. And then what? What did you tell him when he returned? She put up her compact, and she looked at me with vacant eyes. She had a typewriter, Layla said, and her voice had become dull and colorless again. I left a note with her name on it and took all of her things away. I dropped the note on the bed, slumping there. You admit it, I murmured. Her hand dipped into the handbag and came out with a gun. She turned in her chair to face me. It was a small, compact, blue automatic, and it was very steady in her hand. I said, you came to kill me, but first you thought you might as well get in some last-minute lovemaking. No, I didn't want to use the gun. That was the way you didn't want to kill Doan? Yes, but see, I had to. And you have to kill me now because you know I figured it all out. You weren't sure. You said I didn't know, and now I've told you too much. She said nothing and sat as if I carved part of the chair, and the gun was part of her. I had to keep talking. She would want to hear the rest of what I had to say. She would delay that long, and I forced speech past my throat. You left a note for Doan to find out when he returned home. No doubt it said she'd be walking out on him for another man, and all things were gone. He believed it. Murder wouldn't even occur to him. He told nobody she had left him. She had no relatives and was just a man. School was out and nobody missed her. I suppose you waited a decent interval before you went to him. And then he accepted you, and there was no longer any reason not to. But sooner or later he found out. He must have come upon some of the bones. With immense weariness, she nodded. The dogs brought them. Was that before or after he left Norset and didn't return for months? Before. I was living with him then. He didn't want me to. Well, not openly. He thought he was still married to her and there would be some scandal. I went there then and overnight, and sometimes he came to my place in New York. Then one day he phoned and told me. He wasn't sure that you killed her or even that it was Alice. He had to speak to you before he did anything. Yes. And you went to him and danced for him naked, I said. I watched you the other night. I can understand how it was. He was sitting there watching you, hypnotized, not able to see anything else or think anything else. And then the lovemaking, probably right there on the floor, and he was helpless. Alice was dead and you were alive, so why not take what was there, especially since it was you? Your body gets a man, and it got me for a while. The gun dropped. I love you, Harry. We can have such good times together. I didn't want to talk about love, of her and me. The murder she had done kept my mind off of it. He covered for you, I said. I guess he gathered up what animals he had and left his wife. Yes, he dug a new grave for her, deeper this time. But there were parts of her that he couldn't find. She had been devoured and torn apart and scattered, and animals had made off with some of the bones. There was soft earth where that grave had been, a good place for animals to dig in. Some brought back bones, and they had taken elsewhere when buried there. She looked down at the little gun. I tensed, thinking that she would shoot then, but she did nothing at all. She seemed hardly to be breathing. I said, Then Doan drove off in his station wagon with the dogs. He couldn't have kept them with him during all these months. He must have boarded them somewhere. Then he stayed with you in New York. We went to Florida. All right, he drove on to Florida, as he had said he did, but not with Alice, with you. When enough time passed so, a divorce could have been arranged, and then you and he returned to New York and were married. Mr. Hickey said he considered that idea that Doan had committed bigamy. But that marriage was strictly legal, and nothing else was. His first wife was dead, and you lived for a few months in New York, and in the spring came back to Norset, where there was a house to live in, and he had a profession that produced an income of sorts. You had what you had done to get so much, that beautiful hunk of a man to go to bed with every night. Then I hated to say it. Then I met you and fell in love, she said. Above the gun pointed right at my heart. I felt my mouth bitter. Your desires are easily changed. I had stopped caring for him. I began to find him very dull. And you looked for excitement with any man who came along. You weren't any man. I love you. Love? Huh, I echoed and laughed harshly. I don't know any more what love is. Do you? It is what we did together and what we could keep on doing. I would have gone off with you right away, but I couldn't. You couldn't because of his hold on you. Not sex by that time. I believe that. He had an even stronger hold on you. He knew you murdered Alice, and the only way he could keep him quiet was by continuing his need for your body. I tried not to care for you. I knew it would only lead to trouble. She seemed somehow to be sitting lower in the chair, though her torso was erect. I couldn't help myself. I thought once or twice with you would be enough to get it out of my system, but I always wanted you more. I sat slouched on the bed, thinking that was why, until tonight, she had used no other words of endearment for me. Why, in all but the actual physical act, she had been aloof and restrained. She had wanted it to be just transitionary, to end as soon as possible, without commitment and without expecting more, but it hadn't worked out that way for neither of us. She was on the end to silence. Then I realized that it was you I had to have all the time. I told you the last time I was here. Don't you remember how I said I'd leave him and go with you? I also remember you said you needed time to work it out. I don't know that you meant time to break his hold over you, time to get rid of him. You must have been planning how to murder him and how to get away with it. No! Maybe not, I conceded. Maybe not till an hour later when he saw you come out of his bungalow and drove you home. And maybe not even then, because if he could overlook a murder, he could overlook a lover if he continued to dance for him and sleep with him and stay with him and make him happy. He was trapped by you as much as you were by him. He was trapped by your body, and I can understand that. It's one thing I'm in a position to understand easier than anything else. Harry! Her red lips were parted. Harry, do you care for me? I didn't know. Tomorrow it might be different. Tomorrow my blood might flow again through my veins. But tonight I was safe from her. Perhaps it was shock. I wasn't able to care much about anything. Not even very much, even if she shot me. I said, Bill Hickey warned me not to say anything about the bones. But that night outside your home, I told you. I thought that would make you fear him enough to not go back with him. Fear him? Oh, that's a laugh. He was one who needed protection, not you. You realized you couldn't delay. If the police questioned him about the bones and really piled it on him, there was too much risk. He'd talk, and he knew you had a lover. You must have planned it all as we stood on that road. It was no longer a question of eliminating him so you could be with me. It was a question of saving your very own neck. The police would suspect you at once, or you and me both. It would be a common pattern. A wife, her lover, eliminating a husband. You decided to sacrifice me, make me a fall guy. My mouth twisted. That's how much you loved me. I was frantic. Sure, you were frantic. You were frantic for Doan. So you murdered Alice. You were frantic for your own safety. So you set the scene to murder him and let me take the rap. Before I left you that night, you had it all worked out. You told me to come for you in the morning, but you knew that you wouldn't be there. Anyway, not in sight. By the way, you did go to bed with him after. I bet you did, didn't you? Well, I had to. Well, why not? I asked. What did it mean to you? One more time with the man you knew you would soon kill? And when he had you, you slept and then you slipped out. You left everything of yours, what you had to wear, so it would look like he had killed you or tried to kill you the way he was supposed to have killed Alice. You waited hidden nearby for me to show up in the morning. You knew I'd go for the police when I found you weren't there. That fight was a little extra. Both of us helped your scheme along nicely. And when I drove off, you came out of hiding. You stood there talking to him until you saw the chance to pick up the crowbar and let him have it. I noticed your strong arms. I admired them, strong and soft. Soft for lovemaking and strong to smash a man's skull in. I paused for her reaction. There was none. She was not a woman who would break at the memory of a murder or two. She sat silently with the gun pointed at me. The dogs were out of the paddock, I said. That should have told me. They had become used to me, but they tried to get at me when I thought their master. They would have torn to pieces whoever killed him, except the mistress. You were the only person they wouldn't have ever touched. Are you finished? She said with the beginning of impatience. Almost. You told me yourself how you reached New York by getting a hitch on a truck. In New York, you had a friend who you could trust, who could put you up and give you money. A woman friend, you said, but perhaps a man. A woman. All right. Your idea was to stay undercover and let the police assume you were dead. Because of the finger suspicion, they would never point to you. You could go to any other part of the country, take another name. At any rate, sit tight till I was convicted of murder, and you'd have little to fear. But you had no clothes, so you had to go shopping. Gail saw you. That messed it all up. You had to know how great danger it was if it were to become known you were still alive. I was the boy who you could tell. You read it in the paper I'd been released. We'd make love, and as I lay in your arms in front of the fire, I'd spill everything I knew. I wanted you. You always took your hair down, but not this time. You didn't intend to stay long, and you brought a gun. Abruptly, she rose. Here it comes, I thought. Quickly, I said, what's good killing me going to do? The police won't figure it out the way you did. Nobody knows I'm here. I got a lift on a truck, and the driver lives in Ohio. He'll be back here in 2 days, and he'll be too far away to fear me. What about those truck drivers? The police won't suspect me because they won't know I'm alive. I'll just disappear. Gail returned them in. She saw you. Yeah, sure. I was in New York, not here, and I don't think she can be sure. And it's not evidence, just seeing somebody in a crowd for a moment. Her voice was as wooden as her face. I don't think there's real evidence. All you said were just words. Then why shoot me? It'll be bad for me. I'll be in jail, and maybe there'll be a trial. There could be other things, what they call clues. Why should I even take a chance? Not even for the man you claim to love, I sneered. I've lost you anyway, you said so yourself. She touched the gun barrel with her hand and the other angrily. She started to pull the trigger. You're making me do it. I stood up slowly, careful to make no movement that would startle her. All at the same time, the bed creaked, the gun jerked, and my heart skipped a beat. She started to shiver. All her body quaked and the gun shook. Something was happening to her, something deep inside her. Layla, I said, moving gradually towards her. Maybe it's not too late after all. I have an offer to coach basketball in South America. You and me together, Layla. She looked at me. She stopped shivering. Step by step, I was cutting the distance between us and getting closer to the gun. You're lying, she said thinly when I was halfway to her. You're just trying to trick me. The muzzle focused on my chest. Not steady now, but steady enough. I moved on, watching her eyes, and I saw them die. I saw her face fall apart. I can't, she whimpered. I was close enough then to hurl myself at her with a chance to get the gun away from her, but I didn't. I stood watching her crumple, not physically, but in spirit. She slumped down on the chair, and the gun was out of her hand, on top of the shiny beige jacket, and was on her hat, and she put her face into her hands. Perhaps she wept, but I could not hear her. I picked up the gun and snuck it into my pocket and went to the phone. That journey across the room was the longest I had ever taken. My voice didn't act right when I gave the operator the number. For a small eternity, the bell rang and rang before Mrs. Hickey's voice came on. Is Bill in? He's gone to bed. Who's this? Harry Wilde. Oh, Harry, I didn't recognize your voice. I think Bill's asleep. It's important. Well, why can't you tell me? No. The silence returned. I could hear my heart beat. I looked around, and Layla sat without motion. I had become used to the stillness of her, but now it was a stillness like death. Hello, Harry, Bill said. Come right over. What's up? I took a breath. The person that killed them is in my bungalow. I hung up. Through the side window, I saw more lights go on in the Hickey house. Layla said wistfully, We could have had such fine times together. She was smiling sadly, and that smile hurt more than anything else she could have ever done to me, more in a way than if she had shot me. I felt as if I had betrayed her, and myself too, but I had no choice, had I? What else could I have done? I took Bill Hickey only seconds to arrive. He entered without knocking, and he wore a pair of pants over his pajamas. He stopped in the doorway and stared at her. It was very quiet in my bungalow. His shoes squeaked as he stepped towards her. Did you kill them, Mrs. Doane? Yes, Layla said. Well, that is it for that chapter. So apparently Layla is a massive murderer that seems to trick guys into being with her and then murdering their significant others or murdering them. So, wow, I did not see that coming. I told you there's a massive twist in this story. Yes, I know. I'm telling you, yeah. I think that there's just a lot that's going on in this chapter. He should have told them the info on the phone. I know he should have just spit it out. I know, Barbie. All I can say is wow, too. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, Harry needs to leave. Hi, Jeannie. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's see who else is in the chat. I don't see anybody else. Well, welcome, folks. So we are now in the very last chapter of House of Flesh, and it is only 2 pages. So this is coming to a close, but boy, oh boy, has this been quite the book. I'm kind of speechless after that last chapter because there's just so much. What is wrong with Layla? Layla is a complete psychopath. I mean, obviously, this is just bizarre. Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, Gail actually did something good. And see, I thought that Gail was the one. I thought Gail was suspicious, but obviously she just seems decently good. I don't know. I mean, they really didn't flesh out more of her character, so I don't know. All right, guys, so we are going to finish up the last chapter right now. We are in chapter 28 of House of Flesh, the very last chapter, and it is only 2 pages, and then we'll get to discuss, and this ought to be really fun. So here we go, chapter 28, right now. Afternoon sunlight splashed through the windows and through the open door as I packed my books into a couple of boxes. Mr. Hickey appeared in the doorway. Well, we're sorry you're leaving, he said. It wouldn't have been polite for me to reply that I wasn't sorry. I just merely nodded. Are you going back to New York, Harry? Oh, not for another 5 or 6 weeks, I said. A teammate of mine, Luke McLaren, is a director of the boys' camp in the Adirondacks, and he wants me to teach the kids basketball. There's only one woman in that place, a camp mother, and she's at least 60 years old. And I understand that no dogs are allowed. Well, I can't blame you for being bitter. There was nothing to say to that. I started to put my books into the second box. There would have never been a conclusive case against Mrs. Doane, he said. Any competent lawyer could have shown a reasonable doubt of guilt if she had just kept her mouth shut. Bill says she was more or less aware of that, yet she still confessed. Uh-huh. Bill says she bought a gun last night, and she admits he came here to kill you and found out way too much. Instead, she ended up confessing. Gravely, he completed by kneeling at the bookshelves with me. She must have cared a great deal for you. I wish she would have let me alone. When I painted her portrait, I was actually conscious of the turbulent emotions inside that quiet and controlled shell of hers, he said. I mentioned to you as much as I could in a rather dramatic way. She was capable of anything, violent lust and violent murder. I think she burned out last night when she was here with you. You extinguished that flame in her because she cared so much for you, and she no longer gives a damn what happens to her. Can't we stop talking about her? I burst out. Mr. Hickey nodded slowly and glanced through the door. And then he said, You'll be sure to stop in and say goodbye to us. Of course. As soon as he was gone, Polly Wellman came in. He must have seen her approach and left the coast clear for her. She looked fresh and neat and wholesome in a black shirt and a yellow skirt, and she said hello with an open-mouthed smile. I hear you're leaving. Yes. Oh, just go right ahead and pack, she said. Don't mind me. I carried a box out to the car trunk, and when I returned, Polly was sitting on the table. Her legs were crossed, and one foot was in a brown and white low-heeled shoe and was swinging. Harry, when will you be back? I was opening on the floor. Just give me time. Her foot stopped swinging. I didn't raise my eyes any higher than her legs. They were bare and very trim. Does that mean you'll be back? She said. It was too soon to know what I would do and really what I wanted. I think so, I told her. Well, I'll be waiting, Harry. And that is it. That is it for everything in House of Flesh. Obviously, I don't think Harry is ever coming back to Norset. If I were Harry, I sure wouldn't. I would just be done with that mess of people in that small town. Holy moly, what a book. I mean, that was a real roller coaster ride. And I have to say, I was hoping that Harry and Layla got together, but once I found out how Layla was, I am sure glad Harry got out of all that mess. And hopefully we'll have a better basketball season whenever comes next. Now, I don't know what happened with Polly. She's a little, oh, there's Louie. Very excited about the book. She's a little clingy, I feel. So she's probably going to be sitting around waiting for Harry to come back, but I doubt he's ever going to come back. Yeah, now's your chance, Polly, but I don't think that he's going to want to be with Polly. Done and gone. Yes, it was such a ride. It obviously was. Thank you, Chicago lady. I try to do some of the voices. I try to picture how these characters would be. You know, I'm not the best with accents, but I do try, and I enjoy doing this. If I ever get a chance to do another, when we do another book read, because I will be doing another one, I want to be able to work in Foley art. I don't know how I would necessarily do it, but I would try. Like, I would have loved to be able to have the phone ringing and other things. I just think it's a little bit hard to do with one person. I would need somebody here to run the Foley art part of it, but I would love to be able to do a little bit of that. So I'll have to work on that for the next book, but that's where these books will be heading, as I'll be trying to get better and better. And we'll be picking our next book. Now, I have to be careful of copyright. This is something that I feel like with the next book, I need to pick something that's probably like this from the 50s. It's a gold medal book. It's probably not copyrighted anymore. I have to be kind of careful with that. So I probably can't do the Annette book, because we had originally picked Annette Funicello. We had done a Disney. There was a Disney book I got with her in it from the 50s, her little novel, and it was like a murder mystery. I don't think we can do that one because of copyright. So I want to make sure that we're picking something that's safe for YouTube. But anyway, we will be continuing with a new book very soon. I'll announce it over on Instagram. Maybe I'll put up a poll to see which one you guys would like me to read next. Now, I have been working with Doo-Wop Bob. He's in the chat. You guys saw him earlier. He's actually read a lot of the gold medal books because he has a big collection of them. And he was telling me which ones he felt were too saucy for YouTube. Apparently, some of them can get really, really bad. And then which ones he felt like would be just enough. and perfect. So we'll be talking, and I'll figure out which ones would be good. I like getting the books I haven't read. That's kind of my thing, is I like actually not reading the book. So I'm learning exactly what's happening week to week as you guys are learning, because I think that's fun. I think it would be kind of no fun if I read the whole book and then read it here on YouTube. I like to discover it live. I always practice the chapter before I go live, just to make sure there's nothing that I need to skip over. There's been a few chapters, not in this book, but in the last book I read, Katie and Her Camera. There's a few words I had to change just because we don't say those things anymore. And it was just, wrong. I mean, you just wouldn't say those. So I have to kind of scan the chapters a little bit beforehand to make sure they're okay, But I think whatever I pick, I want to be surprised. So that will be fun. Yes, I have doggy sound effects. I do. Louie is a great Foley artist. Yes. Yeah, Louie barks at everything. She does. Let's see. Imagine following this lurid tale with Annette Funicello, right, Teofane? Right, Tim? That would be something. Louie's been barking a lot, so they've been doing pressure washing in our building, and the last couple of trucks are probably leaving. Let's see what time it is. They were supposed to leave at 8 tonight. So I believe the last trucks will be leaving soon, but Louie's been barking all day because of those trucks. Pressure washing, backing up, making noise. It's just been a whole production today with Louie the pug. But this was so much fun, guys. I am so honored I got to read this book and be a part of it with you. Thank you, all of you that tune in every week to watch me read and to follow along with the story that means the world. I just think it's so fun learning what's in these 1950s books. These gold medal books are fabulous. Of course, Fawcett changed the publishing industry forever. The gold medal books had a big part in that. There's so much history to these old books, and really a great dive into what kind of things were out there in the 50s. That's kind of my thought with this too, is a little bit of education and fun, because of course it's fun to read along and see what kind of murderous things happen in these books. And this book, compared to Katie and Her Camera, is pretty tame. Like, we didn't have a lot go on in Katie and Her Camera that was too suspicious. I mean, we had the pot smoking girl, but that was like about it. And that's pretty tame compared to murder and all the sex that was going on in this book. So we're just going to see what our next book holds, which will be so much fun. So guys, that is going to do it for me tonight. Don't forget a couple of things coming up this evening. Jeffrey sale, Real Nifty Vintage, 7:30 tonight. And then, of course, you can tune in to Fatbird Finds. They're having Flippin' and Sippin', which is always a lot of fun. I believe this is their Halloween episode, so there's going to be some hilarious stuff going on tonight on Flippin' and Sippin' at 10 p.m. Eastern. So I'm looking forward to that. And then come back for that costume party on my channel at 6:30 p.m. Eastern this coming Sunday with, of course, Fatbird Finds, Dee from Thrill of the Thrift, Vintage Vinny, and Trusty Huckster Mercantile Patrick. And then we will, of course, have Tales from the Triptych at 8 p.m. with Soul Nate on his channel. He'll be telling the tales of shipwrecked porcelain. So you want to tune in for all of those fun things. And, of course, folks, I hope as always that you will stay in, stay safe, and have a very, very happy Halloween weekend. Bye-bye now.
What?